would describe Milan as being a rather large city in the north of Italy. Milan is something of a state of being, rather uncomfortable state of being, but you know, better than most.
And with that, the tone was set. I had just a day to see as much as I could of Milan, and Charlie, half English, half Italian, 110% sarcastic, was to be my guide. We set out in the morning towards the centre from Cincello Balsamo, the suburb where Charlie lives with his grandparents. When I'd arrived the previous night, it'd been too dark to see anything, so Charlie talked me through the town as we walked.
Well, it used to be worse than this. They tried to put up trees. It was a nice idea, but I mean, as you can see, it looks like a car park. I mean, they've tried, look, so they have these sort of flower beds that look like UFOs. And they got these poor trees, and in about 5 years have not grown an inch. Poor things. And then the problem is also that the church is a bit too small for the square. Look at the size of the church, look at the size of the square. It doesn't work. You need a church twice that size to justify this square.
Tourist traps are thin on the ground this far into the Milanese sprawl, so we picked out our own landmark.
There's something very particular about the provincial Italian shop, which is something that it seems to be made exclusively for people not to buy stuff. They're always, you know, 3/4 empty. You never see anyone go in. But somehow they last longer than shops that are actually useful. So I don't know. I mean, you look at this one and you think, well, okay, Devi's, so it's obviously trying to look like Levi's, but didn't quite. And no one will go in there, but that will continue. That will go on for the next 10 years. Inexplicably.
The few other people out on the streets were mostly gathered around the tram stop. Whilst London prefers to bury its commuters over the maximum possible distance, Milan seems to spool them out on trams into provinces at a 10-mile radius, connected by around a dozen wide straight roads. We headed to Brera, a part of the city just north of the centre. It's full of cobbled streets that curve in increments, so you can never see that far ahead of you. The apartment buildings on either side are built densely in thin lots, and then connected across the streets by hanging lights and wires. Today was market day, and the traders, selling everything from fabrics and photos to books and antiques, were rubbing their hands to keep warm between wild gesticulations, ushering us over. But the only thing that really caught our eye was a small embossed sign, what looked like a kind of menu.
Well, this is the services Madame Marisa is offering to the young men of Italy, and old men of Italy as well, in the June of 1932. This is the summer collection. They have normal service, double service, whatever that is, 15 minutes, an hour. I want to know what a simple service is. You only get 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Oh, obviously it says we recommend, we ask that you clean yourself with soap beforehand. And also, there's a special offer for the military.
Well, she looks very hospitable.
Yes, looks like a nice lady. Actually, if you look at it like that, it does look like a man.
She doesn't look very comfy on that chair.
No. There's Madame Renata, if she's a bit... The same price, though.
Oh, no, she's cheaper
Cheaper for an hour. Oh, with two ladies. See, two ladies, same price as 2 hours with the other one.
Haggling seemed suddenly inappropriate, so we left Madame Marisa where she lay. Safer, it seemed, to turn our attention to the real women and men of Milan.
Milan is typical of maybe a certain type of European lady, maybe they could be Italian, but also maybe French as well. But they're stuck in a certain aesthetic where it's all about the fur coat the fur coat and the face of defence against other people seeing your fur coat. Because obviously, I always give them very horrible, filthy looks. But they have the nose in the air, like defiance of, yeah, what the fuck? I have a dead animal on me. What of it? I would do it with my own hands. I would skin you if I could. The men is more simple. I think Milanese men are some of the most stylish men in Europe, but only over a certain age. So once they hit 60, then suddenly the Milanese man learns how to dress. Hats become a thing. Especially nice wide brim ones. And suddenly they're back to smoking cigars, which is always a classy thing to do. It's one of those sort of rare occasions where men start having a better dress sense than women.
The city itself's built in a jumble of styles. On the bus in from the airport the previous day, the outskirts had seemed to go on and on. Small old towns had been surrounded by encroaching anonymous industries that didn't seem to have changed since their 80s heyday. Those industries had respected the church spire's dominance of the skyline, but only for so long. Idle hands found work, and slowly the sprawl erected its own monuments. Now, walking the city centre, we saw that scale from its underside.
I said it's a weird city in terms of architecture. Everything's sort of massed up on each other. You miss a lot of impressive, strange buildings because of that. It's not really planned in any sort of
How would that
proper
come
way.
about then?
Well, I think a lot of it is down to bombing, Second World War. So I think a lot of places, damaged and then shot straight back up without much thought into it. Obviously, they shot back up in a different style, and some of them sort of overwhelm the others. Also, I think the colour, the sort of general grey, doesn't help. They all merge into one, which is a pity, because if they were on their own or next to something in a slightly different colour, you'd notice them a lot more.
But they all draw you up, don't they?
Yes.
No matter what through them.
True, and the vertical lines draw you up in the middle distance. But however, you still miss some stuff that's close to you. So there's a sort of tower over there, church spire, which I'd never noticed before, because it was too close to me. I had to look up, really crane my neck up to notice it. It's that one there. You can't see it there.
And Charlie kept mentioning these things he hadn't noticed before. After the church spire, there was a frieze near the famous Scala Opera House, decorated with cow skulls, which he pointed out to me with glee.
In Milan you see lots of grain, but in these bits here you forget that if you just walk into these buildings, then they open up to these beautiful green spaces in between them. They hide these away from us mere mortals. Secret gardens.
He's all locked up, I think.
Obviously, yeah.
Big padlock. But wow.
How quiet is it here? Listen to that. Tranquillo. Tranqui.
We headed to Porto Genova, the area that had built up around the banks of Milan's canals. The city didn't grow around a river, as most do. Instead, a network of intersecting waterways was built to supply it as it expanded, adapting the original moats and irrigation channels. Known as the Navigli, many of the routes, including the Fossa Interna, which circled the inner urban areas, have since been covered over, leaving only a few incongruously straight canals to carve up the south side of what feels like an otherwise orbital city.
The point of them basically is Milan doesn't have many waterways, and when in its sort of industrial heyday, you needed some way of transporting. I mean, these predate that, but they only really come into their element when you needed to transport stuff like coal, metal, stuff for industry. They seem to be advertising there some kind of tour of the canals. Should be interesting, but I don't think you get much chance to do that these days. water, they seem to be drained more days than not. I'm not entirely sure why, because they aren't clean here, I think.
Today, the only barges that remain are home to static bars or restaurants, where buskers play as people spill over from the bakeries, bookshops and cafes on dry land.
Over there is Porta Ticinese. It's one of the many gateways into the town. I can't remember how many. They tend to be named either after the town in whose rough direction they point, or something else. So, for example, this one's named after the Ticino River, a small river that passes by here. You have Porta Romana, which is a bit to the south, Porta Genoa, which points to south-west. You have Porta Venezia, which obviously points towards Venice in the east. So we have several of these that sort of trace pretty much the borders of the old city. It's a very small city. If you trace where the walls are, you'll see it's just that little bit in the centre. What you've seen, even when you came to my house, you see it's just a sprawl. But that's very recent. I mean, that's only the last 50 years. Even when my grandparents moved there in the 60s, that was still semi-rural. There was still a lot of people with not intensive farming, but people still had areas where they would grow stuff, and there'd still be animals, and it's all got built up very quickly and also cementified over the last 50 years. So you only get a few hints to what it used to be like.
From the boundary of the old town, we return to the centre, marked as such by the cathedral, Duomo. Though the cathedral itself dominates the central piazza, the more impressive monument is at its edge. A little uncannily, the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, a vast upmarket shopping gallery that opens up onto the piazza, mirrors and even clarifies the cross shape of the cathedral. The gallery is devotional in its own way, though perhaps to rather better dressed gods.
Very beautiful gallery enclosed with this sort of glass archway, basically. Imagine the roof of a Victorian station, except that you have a very elaborate 18th century building.
Though it's the oldest and likely the most beautiful shopping gallery in the country, and claims as its namesake the Kingdom of Italy's first monarch, the Galleria has become better known for an obscure tradition surrounding the image of livestock painted on its floor.
The bulls over there, the one people are almost doing a headstand on it, for fuck's sake. You're supposed to dig your heel into its balls, and then turn, I don't know if it's clockwise or counterclockwise. I guess clockwise, that's what that one is doing. And that's it, it's supposed to bring you luck or something. It's just something people do. I don't think they know why. They're just told to do it. It's funny how people do pretty much anything if you tell them that's what you're supposed to do here.
One visitor, though, had shunted tradition, dissatisfied with the concentration of designer brands, curated again much like the nearby cathedral to instill a delicate combination of aspiration and guilt. This anonymous individual is making a stand.
It's just someone has written this poster, which they want. They want to collect signatures to keep McDonald's in the Galleria. McDonald's has now disappeared. The funny thing is, they can't even spell McDonald's. It's M-E-K Donald's, McDonald's. It says it's truly democratic. We aren't asleep, and we will demonstrate that you guys are on the wrong road. It's time to change. Prada, you're on the wrong road. If you need to pee, can you pee in Prada? No, you can't. It's amazing. It's amazing. I really want to know who did that.
And this was, without a doubt, the most excited Charlie got on the whole trip. We crammed the history and culture of this beautiful city into the space of a day, but it'll no doubt be the memory of the impassioned and barely legible scrawl on an A2 piece of paper that trumps the others. I left Milan knowing I'd seen a different side to it than most, and I can only urge you to do the same.